If you menstruate, here's a number that's going to change how you think about your own body. 400. That's roughly how many periods a modern woman will have across her lifetime. One every month, starting somewhere around 12, running through her 40s. It's so built into the rhythm of modern life that most people just accept it as biology, as inevitable, as simply what a female body does. But here's the thing. That number isn't biology. It's a product of the world we built. Because for almost all of human history, for the vast majority of the time our species has existed, the number wasn't 400. It was closer to 50. Ancient women had roughly 1/8 as many periods as modern women do. Not slightly fewer, not marginally fewer, 8 times fewer across a lifetime. And understanding why doesn't just change how you think about ancient women. It changes how you think about what a period even is, and what your body was actually designed to do. One of the 3 reasons behind that number is something modern life has almost completely dismantled. And once you understand it, you will look at the entire modern period industry very differently. Part 1. The number that changes everything. A modern woman who starts her period at 12 and reaches menopause at 51 will menstruate approximately 468 times. That's 468 weeks of her life spent managing something that was, for most of human history, a relatively rare event. Beverly Strassmann, an anthropologist at the University of Michigan, has spent decades studying menstrual patterns in traditional populations, specifically the Dogon people of Mali, who still live close to ancestral patterns of diet, reproduction, and breastfeeding. What she found rewrote how researchers think about menstruation entirely. Women in the Dogon community average fewer than 100 periods across their lifetime. Some traditional populations studied by Strassmann and other researchers show numbers as low as 50 to 60. The 400 figure, so familiar to modern women, Strassmann calls it biologically unprecedented. It's not normal in any evolutionary sense. It's an artifact of the modern world. This matters because it reframes the entire question of how ancient women managed their periods. Before we even get to what they used, we need to understand that this wasn't something that happened every 4 weeks for 40 years. It happened rarely, and in a completely different biological context. Part 2. Why ancient women had so few periods. The gap between 50 and 400 comes down to 3 factors. They worked together and meant that for most of her reproductive years, an ancient woman simply wasn't menstruating at all. The first factor, when menstruation began. Today, the average age of first menstruation in developed countries is around 12. For ancient women, it was probably closer to 16 or 17. The reason comes down to one thing: body fat. Menstruation requires a minimum level of it to begin and to sustain. Ancient women were lean, not by choice, by lifestyle. They walked miles daily, carried loads, processed food by hand, and ate a diet with no refined sugar and no processed calories. Their bodies simply didn't carry the fat levels needed to trigger early menstruation. 4 or 5 fewer years of periods from the start adds up quickly. The second factor: pregnancy. Once menstruation did begin, pregnancy typically followed fairly quickly, and each pregnancy meant 9 months of no periods. Ancient women had more pregnancies than modern women. Estimates from hunter-gatherer populations suggest somewhere between 4 and 6 live births. That's years of reproductive life spent pregnant rather than menstruating. The third factor: breastfeeding. This one is the biggest of the 3, and it's the one that will genuinely surprise you, because the mechanism behind it is something most modern women have never been told about their own biology. When a mother breastfeeds intensively, frequently, on demand, day and night, her body produces a hormonal signal that suppresses ovulation and menstruation. This is called lactational amenorrhea, and in traditional populations where breastfeeding continued for 2 to 4 years per child, it was extremely effective. Strassmann's research in the Dogon community showed that women who were breastfeeding had a median of just 2 menstrual cycles per year. Put all 3 factors together: menstruation starting later, multiple pregnancies, years of breastfeeding-induced amenorrhea between each one. An ancient woman in a hunter-gatherer community spent the vast majority of her reproductive years either pregnant or breastfeeding. Menstruation was the gap between those states. A brief, recurring window, not the background rhythm of 40 years. Part 3. When they did, what actually happened. So what happened during those 50 or so periods that did occur? The archaeological record doesn't preserve organic materials well. We don't have ancient menstrual products the way we have ancient tools or pottery. But what we do have combined with anthropological observation of traditional populations, gives us a clear enough picture. Sphagnum moss was almost certainly the most effective natural material available across much of the ancient world, particularly in northern Europe, northern Asia, and parts of Africa near water sources. It can absorb up to 20 times its own weight in liquid. It contains natural antimicrobial compounds that inhibit bacterial growth. It's soft, compressible, and present in essentially unlimited quantities near water, which is exactly where ancient groups camped. This isn't a desperate compromise with an inadequate material. Sphagnum moss was used by military surgeons as wound dressing well into the 19th century because of its exceptional absorption and antimicrobial properties. The same material, a different century, the same biological problem. Beyond moss, what the evidence and anthropological observations suggest is a range of practical solutions adapted to local environments and individual circumstances. Soft animal skins, the inner surface of processed hide, which ancient women were already producing for clothing and carrying, were moderately absorbent, reusable, and required no separate craft knowledge. Dried grass, tightly bundled, processed plant fiber, and in warm climates near water, simply wading in, using water itself as part of the management strategy. And some of the time, none of these. In warmer climates, with minimal clothing, flow management worked differently. The framing of absolute invisible containment that modern life demands wasn't the standard ancient women were working against. Different environment, different clothing, different social context, different practical requirements. But containment is only half the story. The other half is something pharmaceutical companies now charge billions for, and ancient women had access to it for free. Part 4. What the body knew. Ancient women had access to plant medicine with real pharmacological activity, not folk belief, not placebo, actual compounds with documented effects on the specific symptoms of menstruation. Yarrow, found across Europe, Asia, and Africa, contains compounds with anti-inflammatory and antispasmodic properties. It appears as a traditional remedy for menstrual cramps across cultures on multiple continents that had no contact with each other. Wild ginger contains compounds that have shown effectiveness for reducing menstrual pain in modern clinical studies. Raspberry leaf, cramp bark. The names are different across cultures, but the botanical knowledge runs remarkably consistent. Then there's heat. A heated stone, wrapped in soft material and applied to the abdomen, is mechanically identical in its effect to a modern heating pad. Fire was a constant feature of ancient daily life. So was the knowledge that heat reduces cramping. It doesn't require written records or formal medicine. It requires noticing and passing the observation to the next person who needs it. Which brings us to the social dimension. Ancient women did not manage their periods alone. In a group of 20 to 30 people living in close proximity, reproductive status was not private. Everyone knew. That awareness, and the practical understanding of what helped, was transmitted directly between women who knew each other, lived alongside each other, and had every reason to share what worked. Older women to younger women, experienced to inexperienced, generation to generation, without writing, without institutions, without formal structures of any kind. Just women who had been through it, and women who were going through it, and the quiet daily transfer of knowledge that kept both groups functioning. Part 5. The smoking gun. The modern data confirms it. Strassmann's decades of fieldwork with the Dogon isn't the only evidence. Researchers studying populations in transition, moving from traditional to modern diets and lifestyles, have documented the shift in menstrual patterns in real time. As body fat increases, as breastfeeding duration shortens, as first menstruation arrives earlier, the period count rises. The bodies change in direct response to the environmental change. Not slowly, over generations. Within a single generation. This is the same pattern that shows up across the human body whenever the modern world changes faster than evolution can track. The biology is stable, the environment changed, the body responded. And the change didn't happen because anyone chose it. Nobody decided that women should menstruate 400 times instead of 50. Nobody planned for infant formula to replace 4 years of breastfeeding, or for processed food to lower the age of first menstruation, or for smaller family sizes to eliminate years of pregnancy-related amenorrhea. These things happened as side effects of other improvements. In food access, in medical care, in reproductive choice. Real improvements with real benefits, and a biological side effect that nobody fully traced. Part 6. The irony that should stop you. The modern period industry is worth over $50 billion globally. Pads, tampons, menstrual cups, period underwear, hormonal contraception partly used to manage symptoms, pain relief, heating pads, supplements, an enormous industry built around something that happened 8 times less often than it does today. That's not a criticism of the industry. Some of those products are genuinely life-improving. The point is what the scale of it reveals. The modern experience of menstruation, monthly, for decades, often painful, often disruptive, is not what ancient women knew. It is not what the female body was shaped to do. What it actually represents is what the female body does when it isn't pregnant, isn't breastfeeding, and is well-nourished enough on modern food to start menstruating years earlier than it historically did. The biology didn't change, the context did, and the body, as always, adapted to its context. The full picture. For most of human history, menstruation was a rare event, not a monthly rhythm stretching across 4 decades, but a brief window, 50 or 60 times in a lifetime, occurring in the gaps between pregnancies and the long months of breastfeeding-induced quiet. When it did occur, ancient women handled it with materials that genuinely worked: plant medicine, with real pharmacological activity, heat from fire, and the practical knowledge of a community of women who had all been there, who shared what helped, who made sure no one navigated it alone. Then the world changed. Food changed. Family size changed. Breastfeeding patterns changed. The body responded the way it always does, accurately, to its environment. And the gap between 50 and 400 opened up. Did ancient women even have periods as we do? No. They had periods, but not like ours. Not this often. Not this long. Not in this context. And not, in all likelihood, with anything like the isolation that modern life has built around an experience that was simply part of the shared life of women who knew each other well. The body hasn't changed. What changed is everything around it.